Hello, it's Abby. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're doing something special and different. I am going to try to solve a mystery, the Honjin Murders. And I have my little Scotty dog friend here, my computer, and my spyglass. We are going to try to solve a murder. It's a very short book. This is the start of a series of Japanese detective stories, and I am seeing how close I can get to solving it. I will be stopping every few chapters to let you know my thoughts, the major players, and things like that, before getting to a part where I will submit what I think happened before we get into what really happened, which means there's plenty of time to stop the video if you want to avoid spoilers. I have my little Scotty dog here for the Scotty Detective Agency, which is sniffing out crime. Let's get started. All right, so trying to solve a murder with me. Here we go. So this is a locked room murder mystery. It is also called the Koto murder case or the Honjin Murders. This story takes place in the Okayama prefecture, and I did a little kind of map of what we're being described as like the setting. So it takes place at this Honjin, which is like a little hotel, and there's a bridge, a water wheel. It's kind of up in the hills, kind of secluded from different people, and this is where the murders take place. What was supposed to be happening here was a wedding. The wedding does still happen, but immediately we have a murder. This is another kind of diagram of how they are very much secluded because of the walls and because of the bamboo on one side and the river, so they're very much cut off from society, which makes it even harder for there to be a closed door murder, because we also it's hard to get to this place in the first place. Our narrator is a mystery writer who doesn't tell us his name. He's being filled in on the details of this case by someone he just refers to as F, who seems like he's related to the doctor that was called in. There is a strange three-figured man who shows up at like a bar down the street and is asking directions to this guy's house. So he stops, and he is very mysteriously dressed. His face is mostly covered, but I do notice that he has 3 fingers, and our narrator wants us to know that that's very interesting because the 3 fingers he has are the exact 3 fingers that you would need to play the koto, which is an instrument. Also, he drinks water at this establishment, and the lady is like, "Oh, this guy is so gross," that she just does not like use the glasses. She just puts them up somewhere, so his fingerprints are on the glass, and they're able to look at those later once the murders have happened. Other main players in this story are Ito. She is 57 years old. She has her hair always in a chigon. She is proud of her family, very dignified. She had 5 children. She is considered the old matriarch of the family. And she used to own a Honjin before the war with her husband, but things did not go their way during the war. Kenzo is the 40-year-old son of this lady. He's the oldest child. He's a scholar and a philosopher. He has poor respiratory health, and he taught in Kyoto for a few years, and he is the one getting married in 2 days. He is angry and in tears when he is given a note right before his wedding, and he rips it up and stuffs all the pieces into his kimono. Then we have Teiko. She's the second oldest, married to a businessman in Shanghai. She's not around for the events, so she's not very important to the story, but she did write to dissuade her brother from marrying the woman he's marrying, so she is not about this marriage. Ryuji is 35. He's a doctor in Osaka. He is the second son. He was not there the night of the wedding, which I think is very suspicious. He came as soon as he heard about the murder, and he was for the marriage, which again is a very weird reason to not come to the wedding, but he told his mother that he wanted his brother to be able to marry this woman and kind of stood up for their marriage. But yeah, I said he wasn't there until after the wedding, which is confusing to me. So he's my prime suspect starting out. And then we have Saburo. Saburo is 25. He's 10 years younger than his brother. He doesn't seem like he was expected. He's been expelled from middle school. He's the black sheep of the family. He's sent to Kobe, a vocational school, and he's expelled from there also. He's unemployed, sly, hated by the village, and he is obsessed with detective novels, which again makes him suspicious. And then we have Suzuko. Suzuko is 17 years old. She's the youngest daughter. She's considered a little bit slow. She is described as a flower blooming in the shade because she has poor physical health, and she's just kind of around, and they just mostly ignore her. Then we have Ryosuke. He's cousins of all these other people. He is the perfect person to manage the estate, according to Ito, the mother. He is also her confidant. She talks to him about all of her concerns for the family. And he's missing early the day of the wedding. No one really knows what he was up to. And then his wife, Akiko, she's married to him. She's unremarkable. She obeys her husband. Her and her husband have 3 children, and it says, who are obviously not suspects. She's the one that's given the note that the servant took from the 3-fingered man that Kento then ripped up. The narrator has told us that she and her children are not important. So I guess we can believe that for now, unless something comes up. Obviously, knowing that her husband would be a good one to run the estate makes them a little bit suspicious. And then Katsuko Kubo is the woman that he's marrying. She was a school teacher in Okayama City. People are against their marriage because of her lineage. Her father and uncle were tenant farmers who went to America. They came back and opened an orchard, and her father died. Her mother left her with her uncle. She graduated school in Tokyo and taught an all-girls school. She has money from the orchard that her uncle sets aside for her that was her father's share. Her and Kenzo met at a conference, and they got together to read foreign languages. He proposed a year later. And Ginzo is her uncle. He's been taking care of her since her father died. She has a mother, but he's her guardian, and I also found this suspicious because her mother does not come to the wedding either. Other people that were at the house that day, the great uncle of Kenzo, who's 70 years old, a matchmaker, and the mayor. Lots of servants, including Nano, who's the guy who took the note from the 3-fingered man, and Kyo, who is maid to the mom. So like I said, my suspicions are on the brother who said he was for the marriage but wasn't there until after the death. And the brother who's really into detective novels, and the cousin who would be really good at running the estate in Kenzo's stay. So those are the 3 that kind of stick out to me as possible suspects, even though the murder has not happened yet. I actually don't even know officially who has been murdered, but those people seem the most suspicious. November 23rd, 1937 is when our events start. So it's sunset. The 3-fingered man asks about the residents at the tavern, and he and 3 witnesses see Kenzo go by right after that on his bicycle. The 3-fingered man drinks from a cup that they then put aside. On November 24th, 1937, Kenzo and Ito argue because she wants Katsuko to play the koto at the ceremony, as is their family tradition. This did not happen when the second son got married. Suzuko is playing with dolls nearby, and she says that she could play, but she's interrupted because Ryosuke made her a box for her kitten, Tama, who had gotten sick a few days before and died, which is obviously not a good omen for the wedding. Saburo tells Kenzo that he heard about the 3-fingered man when he was getting a haircut. So Kenzo is warned that the 3-fingered man is looking for him, and the family is aware as well. November 25th is the wedding and the murders. So early in the day, they have a funeral for the cat. At 7, a note arrives, and all the men are told to start getting ready. Kenzo reads the note and tears it up. At 8, the bride arrives. Suzuko plays the lovebirds on the lovebird koto, which is passed down through the generations. At 9:30, the ceremony ends and the drinking begins. The great uncle gets very drunk and mean, and Saburo takes him home. It's snowing, so Saburo ends up staying at the great uncle's. The bride can play the koto, and does later that evening, even though they didn't let her play it back when it was tradition for her to play it. And the couple is left in the annex, which is where they will be having their first night together. And 2 hours later, there is screams and the sound of the koto playing. So now we know who is at the wedding and what kind of the events leading up to the wedding are. We still do not know who has been murdered, even though it is definitely leaning towards either the bride, the groom, or both. All right, so I've now gotten through chapters 4 through 9. We don't really have any more information on the setting besides that the water wheel was operational at the time of the murders, but is no longer operational. We have confirmation that F is the son of the doctor who was brought to the scene of the crime, but the doctor has died, and that's why F is passing on the information to the narrator. Many people saw the three-fingered man and all thought that he was acting suspicious. They say that he could have been the man in the photo. So when they're looking at kind of the place where the murders took place, they find a photo album and there's a picture of a man, and under that picture it says mortal enemy, and everyone's like, yeah, that could be that guy because he had like a mask over his face and stuff, so we don't know if it's him, but it could be. The narrator also has all sorts of little just things where he's putting his commentary in. It said, incidentally, if you are the kind of reader who enjoys reading between the lines of a story and recall the particulars of the crime, you may already be able to guess what I'm about to write next. Namely, that you only need 3 fingers to play the koto. It's strings plucked by the thumb, index, and middle fingers. And that's exactly what the man has for fingers. We also find out that Kenzo burnt a bunch of diary pages, or someone burnt a bunch of Kenzo's diary pages. It seems like, to me, this is not in the book. One of my hypotheses was that he was like in love with this woman, and that the guy he calls his mortal enemy either led to this woman dying or something happened to this woman while he was sick with pneumonia on an island. We do know that he was sick with pneumonia, and I think it has some sort of connection to why this guy is his mortal enemy. We also have a new fact that he took out a 50,000 yen life insurance policy 5 years ago, so it's not recent, payable to Saburo, because Saburo isn't going to get an equal share in like the estate. So if he dies, Ryuji ends up getting most of the stuff because of the marriage, so Saburo would get his life insurance money. Then Ryuji shows up at 7 a.m. after the murders. He was supposedly at a conference, but then he comes to the great uncle's house on his way to congratulate him. And Ginzo, who is the uncle of the bride, is like, as soon as he comes in, I can tell he's lying. Ginzo is also the guy who calls for our detective to come into the story. Saburo, because of the life insurance policy, gains the most from his brother's death. It is Kenzo. Both Kenzo and his bride have been killed. Saburo gains the most of his brother's death, but he can't be the killer because he was with the great uncle. But our narrator, in typical fashion, says, but perhaps that point would turn out to be of the greatest significance. So we have, again, this information that, like, he would be a really good suspect, but he can't be a suspect, but maybe that's the point. And then the cousin, the police think he's lying because he's acting suspicious. When they hear the playing of the koto and stuff, the uncle kind of wakes everybody up and runs out and gets Ryosuke to kind of help him get into the annex. And he says that the rain shutter was locked. The servant has to hit it with an axe to open it. And it's the cousin, Ryosuke, who opens up the bolt. And so it is his word that this is a closed door mystery and that it was actually locked. The police don't like him. He seems sketchy and cunning. He might know who the murderer is. He might have done it himself. But he already runs the business, so I don't think it was him because I don't really feel like he has anything to profit from the death of Kenzo. Kenzo is already letting him run the estate, and so it just seems unlikely. So it turns out that Ginzo knows this family, that they used to be him and his brother's landlords. His wife thinks that his brother would be happy for the daughter to marry into this family, so he gives his blessing, but he's not really into it. He goes to bed before all the townsfolk leave, and he's the one that wakes up to screams and footsteps. I think that it's suspicious that he's acting so calm. It's like the servants who almost faint at the sight of all this blood, but he's just like chilling there. And he knows the guy is lying because he saw the brother on the train on the way to the wedding. So he was in town already. So why did he not come to his brother's wedding? But we don't know why he's lying. And we meet a new character, Detective Inspector Isakawa. He is a friend of the bride's uncle. It turns out that they used to, essentially he found him in America and supported him becoming a detective, and so now he wants to repay that favor. So before, when I said in 2 hours, they're woken up to the playing of the koto. So at 4:15 a.m., Ginzo awakes, he hears the koto, he sees a servant, Genshichi, in the snow trying to get into the annex. Ito, the mother, yells out the window, and Suzuko comments on the koto sounds, like she knows that it's a koto that she's hearing. Ryosuke arrives, and he and Ginzo try to break the gate to get in. The koto is very loud. It sounds like strings are breaking. Genshi goes in with an axe, and they try to get in through the rain gutter. And then they all go in, but they notice before they go in that the snow is undisturbed. There's no footprints anywhere, and everything's locked up. So they don't know how the killer got in or out. And there is a servant on the cliff who kind of hears the noise and comes running. He comes early every morning, which our narrator says this is important. Then they're told to look for suspicious things. They find the bodies of Kenzo and Katsuko slashed with cuts. They think maybe it's a double suicide, but then they think it can't be because they find a 3-fingered bloody handprint. At 6 a.m., the sun's coming up, and the doctor and the constable show up, and they call to report the big incident to the police. At 11, the inspector arrives, and the snow's starting to melt, so any trace of footprints and stuff is gone. At 12, everyone else is there, and Ginzo calls for Katsuki. At some point, they put a marker on the cat's grave. Then that night, Suzuko is walking or sleepwalking, and she sees the 3-fingered man, according to her. So she screams and wakes everyone up. And the cat's grave is disturbed, and on the grave marker is the 3-fingered mark again. And then the next day, Kozuki arrives. Ginzo fills him in on what's happening, and the police decide to work with him because he has a letter from some high official and wants to look at Subaru's mystery novels to see kind of what mysteries he's into. Here's a picture of like kind of what the murder scene looks like as far as like the building, I mean. So they're locked in, all of these things are shut. There are these things above And there are no gaps though, so it's not the kind where it's like opened up. There are like little gaps, but nothing that like a person could even stick their hand through. Also, all of the strings of the koto have blood on them, and then there's these koto picks, and that is what they find. So presumably the three-fingered man wears those when he kills both the bride and groom with a katana. And then the bridge from the koto is found in a leaf pile in the yard. And Suzuko says she heard the same music playing the night before the murders. So before. The insurance guy thinks it's suicide. But the three-fingered man's fingerprints are on a lot of things. Also, the murder was probably already in the annex before the wedding. Like, they was just hiding in there. And that the couple probably was still awake for a long time, presumably because it's their wedding night. And that he waited till 4 a.m. to kill them because he was waiting for them to go to sleep. She was killed first, and then he was stabbed through the heart on top of her. There are no handprints on the screen, but the koto pick marks have 3 fingers, and the koto pick box was also moved. They do find the note that was torn up and put it back together. It says, "The island agreement will soon be executed. We agreed it be under cover of night by surprise attack by whatever means agreement was made from the one you call your mortal enemy." Saburo reacts really strangely to hearing this, and then this is when he shows them the picture on a scrapbook of the guy that is his mortal enemy, and shows that all of the pages are missing back from when Kenzo was sick. Presumably the killer didn't know about the photo album because he burns the diary pages but not the photo album. And I put, okay, so it was Kenzo himself that burnt the pages, because I don't think that the person would know exactly what pages need to be burnt. And then the burnt fragments say something about a girl playing koto, and then her funeral, and some man being the mortal enemy. There's also presumably a curse on this family, which is that the men of the family died bloody deaths. Kenzo's father killed someone in a land dispute and died of injuries from that. Ryasuke's father killed himself during the war. And the lady on the train is reading about the connection in a newspaper. They say it's the same katana, but it's not. So there's kind of like this idea that all of these things come into play and that it's a murder based on a curse. All right. Chapters 10 through 14, and then I submit my guess to you. We do not have any more information about the setting. We do not have any more information about most of the characters. But on November 27th, Kazuki arrives. Ginzo fills him in on what's happening. On November 28th at 4 a.m., the koto is heard again. Suzuko is out walking again. And Saburo is found stabbed. And the screen has the 3 fingerprints all visible. And so now the other brother that's there has also been targeted by a killer. He does survive, though. That morning, the girl from the train calls the hospital and says that she knows who the killer is. So these are the clues the detective picks up, and the clues which I will use to make my guess. So Kenzo's body is found face up on his wife's knees. The fingerprints and blood were hard to see on the red paint because the annex was painted in red. The koto has a bridge that isn't designed the same way. The bamboo is hollowed out near the tree with the sickle in it. So they found like a tree that has a blade stuck up high in it. And someone's been messing with the bamboo. The crime scene has not been watched because they're all looking for the 3-fingered man, but it was sealed after the murder. Saburo reads mysteries and might have his own guesses about how the murder was committed, or he is the killer. He loves the mystery of the yellow room, which our narrator brought up at the beginning as being a similar case. I have not read that, so that doesn't really help me. Locked rooms can be done with mechanisms, but sometimes that makes them lose their mystery. The cat was not buried before the wedding. The little girl lied about that. because then she felt bad that it wasn't buried and that she has cursed her brother by not burying it properly. The bridge was in the mom's kimono since before the wedding. So the bridge on that koto was an entirely different bridge. And something was buried in the cat's grave, but it wasn't the cat. And the water wheel isn't moving, but was moving that night. And someone shoved shoes, clothes into a kiln, and the water in the pond would be drained, but it hadn't because of the wedding. So like normally they'd drain the water, but they didn't because of the wedding. The lady at the hospital tells us that the bride had been in love with a guy named Taya, and had lost her virginity to him. She hadn't seen him in 6 years until a few weeks before the wedding, and he has some sort of gang affiliations, but he's not the guy in the photo who is the mortal enemy. And our narrator says that this is the key to solving the case, but they don't know it. The people in the story don't know that it is. All right, here's my guess. I think that the three-fingered man is his mortal enemy, but Kenzo did something that he's not proud of, that it's not the three-fingered man that did it. Maybe the three-fingered man is just like a reminder of a time that he failed. My guess is Kenzo wanted to marry Afuyua-san, who was the girl on the island, but she was married to his mortal enemy. They slept together anyway. The three-fingered man catches them and freaks out. She goes down and drowns herself in shame, and they both blame each other for it, both of the men. The recording, I think that the koto isn't actually being played during the murders every night. I think it's a recording of the woman from the island playing the koto, and that then causes Kenzo to remember his promise to the three-fingered man. His mortal enemy will either make him commit suicide or seduce his wife if he ever marries. I think his brother Ryuji came to the island and knows the three-fingered man. I think that his brother actually is Taya, and that he gave a false name because of his gang involvement, because of the time that he was in Tokyo at like the same time as her in med school. So I think he's the one that seduced her. That would also be why he can't show up to the wedding. And he sees her in Osaka because he is a doctor in Osaka. And this is why he's not at the wedding. But that the three-fingered man is involved in this gang as well, and he had his fingers cut off. He hears that the brother is marrying her, and he can't have that. He writes the letter to seem supportive, but he needs to come down secretly and take care of things. He sends word to the three-fingered man, and they hatch a plan to make Kenzo kill himself. That's why the three-fingered man plays along, but he sneaks into town from the back road, has the three-fingered man deliver the note as a way to pay off some of the debt, and meets him by the water wheel and kills him. He hides his body there, puts it in the kiln. The clothes would be wet, so he burns them instead of burying them, and he cuts off the guy's hand. Then he sneaks across and down the hill. He hides in the closet. No one remembers seeing him because it'd be normal for him to be at the wedding. Maybe the cousin does see him but says nothing. He waits until they're asleep, and then he kills both of them. The koto sounds are pre-recorded, and they're of the young woman from Kenzo's past. He attaches the bridge of the koto to fishing line that goes through the bamboo thing over the wall, and he pulls it to slide the lock over and knock down the screen, and then it shoots out and falls in the pile of leaves, and that's the string breaking sound. And then he comes back the next night to dispose of the hand in the cat's grave, and that's when his sister sees him, but he has to pretend it's not him. He continues to play the recording to lure Saburo to try to solve the case and tries to kill him too. Saburo is the beneficiary of Kenzo's life insurance, but my guess is they would all go to Ryuji if they were both dead. And his disguise is his surgical mask because the guy who attacked Saburo has a surgical mask on, and he is not really a doctor. I think that the cousin knew about it but turned the other cheek because he doesn't like Kenzo and Saburo. because then he can take over things completely. And Ito took the Koto Bridge because she didn't think her daughter-in-law deserving of it, and it's actually not related at all to the murders. So I finished it. Some things I got close, some things not close at all. Three-fingered man, not involved in the murder at all, was just a man who was looking for to get to his aunts. And you know, when you ask directions in a small town, people tell you like, oh, it's over there, it's over there. So he asks at the tavern where this like big estate is, because that's the direction he's supposed to be going. It turns out he just dies of malnutrition out by the water wheel, and it is completely irrelevant to the case. It turns out that the killer is Kenzo himself, which I kind of guessed on because I said that they are going to make him commit suicide. He does commit suicide. He commits suicide because his wife is no longer a virgin, and he hates that about her, hates her, wants her murdered, but also is despising himself for it. And so he sets up this elaborate thing to kill her and have it look like a murder and not a suicide, so that Sabaru still gets his money, because you can't get life insurance money. Sabaru finds him kind of rehearsing how this will all go down, which I'll tell you about in a minute, and helps him with the plans. And so he is an accessory to murder. And Sabaru is also the one who attacks himself in the same manner that I'll get to in a minute. It kind of miscalculates it and almost kills himself too, but he wants to get the suspicion off of him and off of his brother. So Kenzo sets up this whole thing where he is going to go through with the marriage anyway, but him and Sabaru burn the journals, do all this stuff that makes things look suspicious, ripping up the note, all of these things. The three-fingered man never delivered the note. But he sets up like fishing wire or koto wire like over the top, just like I had predicted. But what it actually is not attached to like the doors and stuff. Those really are locked from the inside because he is the murderer himself. But it's attached to the katana. And so as the water wheel is moving, then it pulls the string, and the string pulls the katana, and then it like hits the thing and snaps, so the katana falls down, the screen falls over, the koto bridge falls into the leaves, and the water wheel brings all the fishing wire stuff underneath the water so that no one would ever know that it was set up. So essentially he stabs his wife and then like pushes the katana into his own stomach, and while he's like dying, he puts on 3 fingers of the koto things and is playing the koto, getting blood all over it. And earlier in the day, he found the three-fingered man dead, and him and Sabaru like cut the guy's hand off and put like prints all around the room. And then Sabaru gets rid of the hand by putting it in the cat's grave. And it's just like a complete mess. But anyway, all of my guesses, I guessed partially right on the suicide thing and partially right on the string, or like how they got the locked door thing, even though I said it was controlling the lock instead of just controlling the murder weapon, but that it did have to do with the water wheel and the pulling of the string. But yeah, that was a very good story, I'm looking forward to reading more of the mystery. Let me know if I should do this for any of the other mysteries, and here's to solving more murders. I'll see you in the next video.